So sublimation is a really fun and useful crafting technique that creates vibrant, full color objects such as shirts, mugs, tumblers, signs, and so much more. It's trending right now, and more people are getting interested in it, which is awesome. I love that. So this seems like a great time to talk about sublimation tips for beginners. Specifically, what I think sublimation beginners need to avoid when they're first getting started. And I'm going to keep this simple so I don't overwhelm you. I have 5 important tips for anyone who is thinking about starting in sublimation or is still a beginner at it, or maybe has that printer in a box and hasn't gotten it out yet. All right, so first, don't judge your project before you press it. Sublimation prints don't reflect the true colors on paper. You need to press it and transfer your colors before you can truly see what they're going to look like. Let me give you a close-up of these two so you can see. So this is our sublimation print. This is what it looks like. This is on high quality sublimation paper, 125 grams, so it's holding lots of ink. I want you to see how it looks a little muted, right? Nothing is really vibrant. If you are a beginner and you print the first time and you see this, you might be like, oh my gosh, this isn't what it looks like on my screen. Something is wrong. But you cannot judge it before you press it. This is what the same press, this print looks like once we press it. Huge difference, right? It really makes a difference. And so don't just print it out and be like, oh no, I made a mistake. Press it first before you decide. Second, avoid cotton and unusual surfaces when you're new. Stick to 100% polyester, like this, and sublimation blanks, like this one here. You can do other things, but to really understand how sublimation works, you really want to test with the basics, right? It's such a big deal. High quality sublimation blanks are much easier to get a nice transfer onto, right? So for example, with our wood signs here, it's better to go with a sublimation blank if you're a beginner rather than try to get fancy and paint it and put polyacrylic on it and do all the extra things, right? These are the extra things are for once you've got the basics down. In the beginning, start with a blank, or really in the very beginning, get yourself a few yards of polyester. This is from the craft store. I just went over there. I picked out 100% polyester. I got a nice satin, so it'd be all shiny and everything. And this is what I test on. It's inexpensive. There's a lot of it here. It will last a really long time. And I know I will always get the truest colors on this polyester. So if you're a beginner, just skip the fancy stuff and all the crazy techniques. You may see me talk about them, but I'm talking to all levels, right? Start with this. Start with the basics. Third, I want you to understand, this is really important, you do not need every press or accessory before you start. Pick one and practice for a while. A Cricut Easy Press 2 or 3 is a good choice, as you can do a lot of different projects with them. Other things you need are a sublimation printer, sublimation ink for it, sublimation paper, an uncoated white butcher paper, which is right here. And honestly, even a sublimation printer is optional in the beginning because you can order sublimation prints from Etsy if you just want to try it out. Okay, so you really can try it out with less than you think, right? So you could skip the sublimation ink and the printer and the paper. And then really all you really need is some uncoated white butcher paper and something to press with, and then something to put it on. And that 3 yards of polyester you got is a great place to begin, right? Or that polyester t-shirt you found at Walmart. And, especially 100% polyester in the beginning is a good idea. All right, our next one, oops, I gotta grab a thing here. Fourth, don't use a Teflon sheet on top of your sublimation print when you press. A lot of people are used to heat transfer vinyl and they have Teflon. It will trap moisture, which can lead to blurry prints. Also, some of your sublimation ink might migrate onto the Teflon sheet, and then that ink is there every time you go to press again, which means it can mess up future presses. This is what it looks like if anyone's not seen one before. So instead of Teflon, get yourself a nice big roll of white uncoated butcher paper. This will last you a long time, and use it with every press, right? Always a clean sheet with every press. So no to Teflon when you're a beginner. A lot of people make that mistake because sometimes it comes with a heat press, right? Put this down here. There we go. Sometimes it comes with your heat press, so you're like, oh, well, it must be the right thing. But remember, heat presses are also for heat transfer vinyl. Speaking of which, my 5th tip is to use blue tape, not yellow tape or green tape. You want to use blue tape like this. Let me show you what it looks like. This is a big deal, okay? Because some tape, let me give you an example of one. This here, see it's green, okay? So some tape is appropriate for sublimation and some is really intended for heat transfer vinyl. And it will actually transfer its colors to your project if it gets too hot. So I recommend the blue tapes. Avoid the yellow and green ones. Okay, I'm using Cricut heat resistant tape here. And I also recommend you always use your tape. It is so important that your sublimation print not move around when you lift your press up, because if it does, it will mess with your design and you'll get some blurring, right? The sublimation process is still going on when you stop pressing. So you have to wait. You have to keep the print really tight while it cools down. So use lots and lots of tape. And those are my 5 big tips. Okay, so I don't want to overwhelm you. I can keep going on and on, of course. But those are the 5 things I want you to focus on when you're just starting out with sublimation or before you even begin. Who's got questions for me? I want to answer your questions. What's the role of Teflon in sublimation? It doesn't really have a role. Teflon is for heat transfer vinyl, not for sublimation. So use your Teflon sheets for all your iron-on vinyl, all of your HTV, but don't use them for sublimation. It does not have a role. Heather says, do you have similar designs? And oops, that's not a sublimation question. Sorry, I got distracted there. Okay, do you need to seal sublimated items such as a cutting board? And if so, what do we seal it with? You don't need to seal them. Nope. What's really cool about sublimation is that it goes right into the coating that's on here, right? Whether you put a coating on or whether it comes with one. Again, if you're a beginner, I recommend that you avoid the putting coatings on things. That's an intermediate step, right? So you'll want to just stick with a sublimation blank. You can buy many of them. There's lots of them on Amazon, or better yet, just get yourself some white polyester fabric, right? Like this. This is a whole bunch of it. Really easy, really inexpensive, great for testing. Oops, and I missed the question. I got distracted and where was the question? There we go, sealing. If you are making a cutting board, that's a more intermediate thing, unless you find a sublimation blank. If you find a sublimation blank, honestly, it's not going to be like an real cutting board that you use. I don't think that anything that's got sublimation ink and any kind of like surf coating on it is a cutting board you'd want to use. So I would say no to that. It would be decorative only, right? Unless you just, you can always cover it with a little saran wrap or whatever, plastic wrap, and put out your charcuterie on it or whatever. You can totally do that, of course, right? Let's see. All right, I'm looking for beginner questions. I will take other questions that are about this project after this. I'm going to cut this a little part of the YouTube video. I really just want to talk about the things that those tips that I went over, really basic stuff, so I don't overwhelm anyone. All right, so what exactly is the tape called and how is it different from what's used with HTV? That's a great question. So this tape I'm using here, this is Cricut heat resistant tape. Cricut heat resistant tape. I put it into a little, this is a regular Scotch tape dispenser. Someone asked me about that the other day. I put it right in there. I want everyone to also see it doesn't quite fit, but it fits well enough. See, it's a little smaller, but it works just fine anyways. So this is just Cricut heat resistant tape. There are other brands that you can get. I think PYD Life also makes blue tape like this, right? I always just use Cricut stuff because I'm the most familiar with it and I have it. So it's on hand. Also really easy to get if I run out because it's at Joann and Michael's. That PYD Life stuff, it is not there. So I recommend the blue. I basically am recommending blue Cricut heat resistant tape because that is what I use and I know it works. What I want you to avoid is anything that has like a yellow hue to it. So this green stuff that I have here, I got this with some other heat press I bought. It's intended for keeping your heat transfer vinyl projects onto your surface, right? So it's for vinyl projects because the heat doesn't get as hot in those, right? So it's not going to transfer its color. They also make yellow ones, same. It might come with your press, so it might confuse you if you don't know that heat presses are for many different uses, right? Not just sublimation. So stick with the blue stuff. Never had any of the blue tape transfer. I have had the green and the yellow tape transfer. Okay, is parchment the same as uncoated butcher paper? No, it isn't actually. So butcher paper, and this is a roll of butcher paper. Here, I've used it, got it taped up. Butcher paper actually has different pores. It's like the porous nature of it is different than parchment paper. And this is what works the best for our projects. It will allow the moisture to pass through rather than get trapped. That's what we're looking for. So this regular white uncoated butcher paper works the best for sublimation because you need something that will allow the moisture to pass through rather than get trapped and then go into your surface. And you also want something that you can use a clean sheet of each time, right? Let's see here. Adonis says, can you use packaged paper instead of butcher paper? Yes, you can. Under my gingerbread house here, I have, let's see if I can get to it. This cart here that my gingerbread house is on is actually my sublimation teaching cart. So I've got everything in here from, I just can't quite get to it. When the gingerbread house comes off, we'll get to it. Let me show you this here. A lot of people get confused by this stuff too. This is butcher paper. It is pre-cut. It is like 12 by 12. It's like perfect for this. It's of course a little more expensive, but if you don't want to just tear off a sheet, you can buy this instead, right? And it looks a little different. So I think that's why people get confused by it. It's got a slight sheen to it. You kind of see a little bit right here, whereas this stuff doesn't. It looks a little different. It's still butcher paper. It's still not coated. It's still going to work great, right? It has two sides. It doesn't matter which side you use. It does a great job. So that's what this is. So you can use this or you can use the stuff that comes on the roll, okay? Let's see here. This is a great question. Do sublimation blanks come with a plastic coating that needs to be removed before heating? Yes, and that's also a great thing that beginners need to watch out for. So let me show you here. I think this one has it on yet. It does, yes. Let's put our little sign back up. Here. All right. This is a sublimation blank. This is a wood sign that it's been painted or somehow coated in white and also coated in sublimation. Okay, it's got a sublimation coating of some kind on it, which means it has a polyester coating. If I hold this up, let's see if I can get to hold this up a little bit more to the light, get some light on this so you can see what it looks like right here at the edge. Do you see these little wrinkles right here? See? This has a coating on it. If you turn it over, you'll see it's on the back also. So a lot of blanks that have are rigid, they will have a protective coating on it to protect them, usually during shipping, right? Because if they're not protected, they'll slide up against each other and they might damage the coating. And then that would mean that you wouldn't get a great transfer. So if it's like, you'll see it on ceramic, you'll see it on metal, any sublimation blank that has that's smooth, right? So you want to be sure to remove the coating from the entire thing, front and back, before you press it. A lot of people don't realize it's there, right? So, but if it feels like, you can usually tell it feels like it. If you're not sure, just take a little weeding tool, your finger, and just start to peel it, right? See if you can get at the edge. Hold it up to the light to see if you can see, you know, that, something like that. Okay. Does one sublimation ink outperform the others? Well, this is a hard one for me to test because once you put sublimation ink into your printer, you don't really want to change your brand. I've used so far 3 different sublimation inks. I've used Sublimation in my Sawgrass. That's the Sawgrass brand of, I'm sorry, I've used 4 sublimation inks. I've used Sublimation in my Sawgrass. I've used Epson sublimation ink in my Epson F170. I've used Hippo ink, which is, here's the box for it. And I've used that in my Epson Eco Tank, which is right here. And I have used Printer's Jack in my Epson Workforce. Honestly, they're all just great. What really matters is that you are using the right settings when you print. I talk about this in my Sublimation for Beginners video if you want to understand that more. The Sawgrass is good to go right out of the gate. The Epson F170 needs to be sure to use its printer drivers to get the best color. The Epson Eco Tank, sometimes it's great when you first begin. I'm using an ICC profile. That is not, I don't feel like that an ICC profile is a beginner topic, but I'm using a special printer profile to make the colors super vibrant. You don't often have to do that at all, though. You should definitely just try it without. And then the same for the Printer's Jack. I'm using special printer profiles. They're free. You can get them, and I explain where to get them in my Sublimation for Beginners tutorial. Jody says, could you use a heat press mini for sublimation? Usually, yes, but it depends on your project. So the thing about sublimation is that it really needs to have a nice, consistent, even transfer for the best results. So something like a heat press or a traditional press is really good because it has this big flat surface on it, right? So when you press something, and we will simulate it with this one right here, you bring it down, you press it, you leave it there for the required amount of time, and you don't move it. It just sits there, and when it's done, you lift it up and you let it cool off. And in the meantime, it's all consistent pressure, and it produces a consistent result like this. If you use a mini, you have to move it around. So some parts might get more heat than others. You might also accidentally move your transfer sheet, even if you've taped it down really well. And it takes a while to get the whole thing pressed. So mini heat presses work good for really tiny things. So I've used them for sublimation ornaments. That's totally, sublimation earrings, small things that where you can basically, that little press covers the whole thing or most of it, right? So that you don't have to move it around too much. That's what I think they work best for. Bobby says, can you or should you use a pressing mat at all with sublimation? Absolutely, you want to use a pressing mat. I don't have mine sitting here, so let's grab it. So we have it complete. Grab it so you can see what one looks like. I have one right here. This is the Cricut the Cricut pressing mat. You can use it for, whenever you use an easy press, but these work great. Now, if you have a traditional heat press, it probably already has a pressing pad on it, and you should use it. If you're using the Cricut Auto Press, same thing. It comes with its own pressing pad, and you should use that one. But you do want to have a nice, even, consistent surface for your project to lay on. That's important to do. With your butcher paper, can you keep reusing it, or do you replace it every time? Replace it every time because the butcher paper is there to protect your heat press. Because when the sublimation ink gets heated and turns into a gas, it can escape the piece of paper. So here is the print, right? It's just paper, right? And so when we're pressing it, sometimes some of the ink can actually migrate through your piece of paper, right? It can come up here, or it can escape out the sides. Either way, right? So having this here helps you, protects your press, because if you get sublimation ink on your press, you can then transfer it to another project. But if it just goes into your butcher paper, you just recycle this and get a new sheet out, and then you don't have to worry about transferring that ink to your next project. So I always use a new one. The only times I might not use a new one are when it's very obvious that there was no ink on it. Like you can kind of tell, you'll see like a really faint little ghosting on it if anything transferred to it. Or I know that whatever I'm doing is likely to do it, right? But that's not really a beginner topic. So I recommend that beginners always use a clean sheet of butcher paper. Above, on top of their sublimation prints, and also you need to protect this as well. I usually use a piece of cardstock, but you can also use butcher paper if you just want to stick with butcher paper. Does the size affect the color? For example, is smaller bolder, or does that not matter? That's a great question. And no, size does not affect the color at all. Do I have our doormats here? I don't. We did awesome doormats, really big, super vibrant, right? We've got ornaments, really tiny, super vibrant. It doesn't make any difference at all. It's not like Shrinky Dinks, which we just did a tutorial on. That's not sublimation, but when they shrink, the colors become more vibrant. So no, it doesn't matter what size it is. You get the same. This is all ink. It's whether it's a teeny tiny little bit or a big area of ink, all of this ink will transfer to your project and look amazing. Look at the colors on this. It's just beautiful, don't you think? One of the things about sublimation is that the colors are very vibrant. It's really cool. And unlike vinyl, like heat transfer vinyl, with sublimation, we can get all the gradients, right? So if you look at this, you'll see it's not just orange and gray, but there's variations in the gnome's hat here and in his beard and in the pumpkin. So with sublimation, you get all the colors, not just a bunch of solid colors, which is what we get with vinyl. Cindy says, do you need to print something at least once a week to keep the ink from drying out? So this actually brings me to another topic, and that's your printer. I feel like I should do a whole video on printers, because as I go further in my sublimation journey, I'm learning more about them and what I recommend for people. So if you do what most people do and get an Epson Eco Tank and convert it to sublimation using sublimation ink, then yes, you need to print from it at least once a week, if not every few days, because if you don't, you can get your sublimation ink clogging in your lines. In fact, right now my yellow is clogged and it's not working. And that's because this printer was not made for sublimation ink. It has no maintenance functions that help it keep the lines clear. Sublimation ink is more likely to clog, and that's just the nature of it. So you need to it's needier when you use an Epson Eco Tank. And you got to print at least once to keep everything flowing. And even then, you might have issues. If you go with a dedicated sublimation printer like the Sawgrass, it has auto maintenance features that prevent that from happening. You need to keep it plugged in and turned on so it can do them, but it will take care of that for you. As I go further along in my journey with sublimation, I find I am much preferring my Sawgrass over my Epson. The Sawgrass is super reliable and very easy to use, whereas the Epson is more finicky and I have to take more care of it. And right now, I got to fix its yellow clog line. Also, and I've heard this from many people, sadly, we're basically hacking a printer when we take an Epson Eco Tank and put sublimation ink in it instead of the inkjet ink. And sometimes it just stops working and you have to get a whole new printer. I know people who've gotten the printer 2 or 3 times. I feel like it would have been easier just to get the Sawgrass. It's easier to set up, it's more user-friendly, and it's got amazing support. So, I mean, the jury's still out, and I think the Epson EcoTank is a great way to start. But if you're going to do this to any length of time, I feel like a dedicated sublimation printer is really going to be more reliable in the long run. Marcy says, I have pink butcher paper. Does the color of the butcher paper matter? Yes, it does. Sometimes it works, but I've also seen the color transfer. It really depends on how the butcher paper was made. If the color was printed on there, that ink can transfer at high heat. If it's some other kind of dye, it might not. So it depends. So I really recommend you use white, not that brownish pinkish stuff that the actual butchers often use, but this stuff, use the white stuff. Linda asks, does sublimation ink go a long way? If you mean, does it last a long time? It does, yes. So we have made many projects on this Epson EcoTank. We use it for most of our tutorials because most people have the Epson, and I find it's useful if they see their printer, right, being used. Can you see? These were full in April. I have not refilled it. It's about halfway down. So yeah, I think that sublimation ink lasts really quite a while. You can get a lot of prints out of it. I don't know exactly how many, but it's a lot. It really is a lot. Melinda asks, is sublimation safe to use in a room with a gas fireplace? What is important about sublimation is that you have good ventilation. I don't really know anything about gas fireplaces. I don't have one, so I can't speak to that. But what would matter is that you have good airflow, maybe even a window open, a fan going. That's what matters. It's not, as far as I know, it's not dangerous in terms of something like a gas fireplace. What matters is your safety and inhaling the sublimation ink fumes, right? I want you to be safe, right? It's still ink. It goes into the air until it solidifies, right? So if you're sitting right there, and you're pressing and you get your face really close to it and you're in a little spot with no air circulation, when you lift up your press, that ink is going to go into like the close area, right? It's going to kind of go like this, right? So you don't want a full face of that. I don't know what would happen if you do. I just know that can't be safe. So use good ventilation. It's important. I'm sure that, in time we'll understand, but it's an ink, right? It's an ink. You don't need that in your lungs. Fran says, once you've printed it, do you have to use your sublimation print right away? No, you don't. You just want to keep it out of sunlight and away from moisture. So put it into, a file folder and put it somewhere in the dark or something. But you could use these, again, that the paper is just holding your ink for you, but it won't expire so long as it's not like sitting out under the sun, in front of your window where it's getting all humid and the UV rays are damaging it. But yeah, this is why we can just order prints from people and they can ship them to us and we can use them. I have done sublimation prints like a year ago and still printed them. I'll find something I did and I'm like, oh, I should do a test. I've already got it. Let's test with it. And it works just fine. All right, I think I've answered all of our beginner questions. If you have more questions, I highly recommend you come to our sublimation group. It's an awesome group full of beginners and experts, super helpful, lots of inspiration there. We're doing all the beginner stuff and all the cool advanced stuff too. You'll find that over at jennifermaker.com/sublimation group. We would love to have you in there. And I see a few more questions about our project. I think, okay, so, or things that weren't beginner questions. I don't want to confuse our beginners. So Christina says, what polyester spray do you recommend to make an item sublimation ready? So I use the N Goodies sublimation spray, but I want to caution you that I don't think sublimation sprays work so great. They're okay, right? And they're more okay for things that you will never wash. Once you wash them, it doesn't wash out completely like it would if you didn't have it, but it definitely looks more faded, right? So it's, the other thing about sublimation sprays, it's really difficult to get a nice even coating. So your projects will still look a little blurry or a little blotchy. It might not matter to you at all, so you can experiment with it, but the one I'm using, and sometimes it works, sometimes it does, sometimes I don't like it. It's called N Goodies. We did a project with it, our sublimation on cotton shirts. And if you would like to watch that video, you can see how it looked after it was washed. Lisa says, can you sublimate or use infusible ink to put a design on your heat mat? Don't do that, because every time you go to heat it up, it will then transfer that ink. Again, it'll keep doing it. And then it'll go into your project. So don't put any design onto this, if that's what you meant, because once you heat it up again, it will just start sublimating again, right? The heat. So that's important to know, that if I were to take like this beautiful sign here and put it under a heat press again, chances are it will become a little lighter, because some of that ink will get drawn out when it gets sublimated. It'll go into like the butcher paper or something. It also might blur a little bit, because you'll get like ghosting, which is kind of like where you kind of see an image on the, kind of on the side or something. So you really don't want to reheat it or anything like that. So if you have a dryer that gets extremely hot, or a dishwasher that gets extremely hot, just be aware that it's possible that sublimation process could start. Sublimation ink sublimates between 350 degrees and 400 degrees Fahrenheit. That's really, really hot. Most dishwashers and dryers don't get that hot, but you never know. Just if it's like in a pocket, right, and there's a lot of heat, there's nowhere for it to escape, it's possible that it could. I've heard a couple stories about that. Heather says, is there a way for me to make your sublimation projects using vinyl? I don't have the ability to do sublimation yet. You can do print then cut. Yes, I have a whole tutorial on how to do print then cut t-shirts. So you could use that process and put that print then cut material onto pretty much anything. So, so you could just print it out on that and then press it onto whatever surface you want to use. So yes, you totally can use any of our sublimation designs and put it onto something using print then cut. You don't even necessarily have to do the cut part. The important thing is to get it onto a printable. They have printable, it's basically like a printable heat transfer vinyl. They usually call it like transfer paper, but it's not just paper. So my print then cut t-shirt tutorial is our second most popular project on YouTube. So if you just go to YouTube and type in Jennifer Maker print then cut, it'll be the first one that shows up. And then you can use that process for pretty much anything that you want to print out and put onto something, including t-shirts, obviously. Cheryl says, with this technique, I think you would be able to sublimate all those wood blanks I see at the Dollar Tree and other craft stores. Absolutely. And we did a tutorial on using Dollar Tree blanks for sublimation in the summer, I think it was. So if you check my YouTube channel or my blog, you'll find it. Lots of different ways, and including the hacks to get a coating onto them so that they will sublimate, because by themselves, those Dollar Tree blanks typically don't just sublimate unless they're made of polyester. So the polyester socks and the dish towels and the baby towels, those will all sublimate because they're all made of polyester. But things like the wood shapes, you would want to put polyacrylic on them, or like laminate or something like that, so that you can then put your sublimation onto them. All right. And it looks like my comments have been scrolled down. Janice says, so I'm guessing if you put your sublimated mugs in the dishwasher, you want to put them in the top rack. Yes, I recommend the top rack. Indeed. And thank you for the kind comments, everybody. I really appreciate that. What model of sawgrass printer do you recommend? There's two models. There's the SG500 and the SG1000. So you have just two choices. The only difference besides price is the size of the print. The SG500 is letter size, and the SG1000 is a larger format. So if you think you're going to do big stuff a lot, go for the bigger one. Otherwise, the SG500 is just fine. I have both here, but I use the SG500. So, because I can make big prints just using a smaller printer, using the tile method. So it's smaller. It's easier to fit in spaces and stuff like that too. All right, awesome. Thank you all for asking questions. Again, if you have more questions, come to our Sublimation group. It is an awesome group. It's full of amazing people. It's really, really good. I learn from them every day. Every day. I don't consider myself to be an expert in sublimation yet. I'm still teaching it. That never has stopped me. I'm still a learner, but there's people in there who've been doing it for years, and I've been doing it for a couple of years now, right? So it takes time, right? It takes time to learn these things, and I just need a little bit more time before I say I'm an expert. Sally says, what do you do with all the beautiful things you make? Well, in the very, very beginning, I used to give them away to friends and family, but I learned my lesson on that because you all would ask me a question about something and I'd be like, I don't know, I gave it away. So now all of our projects are kept here at our studio or in our storage unit because we've run out of space in our studio. We put everything into little bins with labels and all of the extra materials and tools and extras, and we keep them there, and then we can bring them out and talk about them when we're doing a video about something, or someone has a question about the size of something and we forgot to make a note of it, or anything. So we have quite a few plastic bins with projects now. It's kind of cool. One day when we have our new studio and our awesome storage space, I'll take a picture of it so you can see everything all neatly labeled because it's kind of cool if you like organization. So have a wonderful day, everybody, and hopefully I see you tonight at 7 p.m. at their premiere. Bye.